So from that standpoint, from that impulse, we call it the impulse to enlightenment, but until it kind of finds its resolution, we don't even know what that means. We don't actually even have a way of knowing what it means until it starts to dawn within our own experience. And then we can think that the thing that seems to get in the way of it is this thing, in spiritual circles, I like to call it the fall guy of spirituality, the ego. Everything's to blame on my ego. But that's not actually the truth. Because that would assume that your ego as an entity is creating all sorts of creating everything, is manufacturing all of your experience. The ego is the poor thing that's trying to deal with your experience. Right? It's, in fact, in many ways, the ego is defined by a not complete, but almost complete inability to create experience. It's negotiating experience most of the time. You ever noticed it's, so when we sat in here for 15 minutes together in silence, you notice that your experience doesn't cooperate with what your ego wants it to be. It's whatever's creating your experience clearly isn't listening to your ego's preferences. Like you may want, I want my mind to be quiet, and maybe one day it's quiet and your ego thinks I'm getting onto this, and then the next day it's not, and the ego thinks, gee, I wasn't as good at this as I thought. Either way, it didn't create either one of those experiences. The ego is simply that which is trying to negotiate its way through experiences that for the most part it's not even creating. How many times do you experience experiences that you would rather not experience? Like every day? Almost every hour? Some days, seemingly every minute? Some days, continuously having experiences and thoughts and ideas and reactions that you wouldn't want to have, you don't want to have? It's part of the human experience, isn't it? And there's your ego, poor thing, trying to negotiate all that. How can I be with this anxiety that I don't want to be having, or this anger that I don't want to be feeling, or this whatever? This desire that my spiritual side of my ego says I shouldn't be feeling. How do I negotiate? So the ego is in many ways, not entirely, but to a great extent, it's just trying to make its way through all this experience that it's not even creating, that it's not even manufacturing. That's one of the upsetting things about it. Some egos, in response to having experiences and thoughts and ideas and everything that they can't control, will get really angry, right? Why is this happening to me? How did I get the mind I have? Who's responsible? Why did such and such happen? Some egos can get very sort of self-defeating. Oh, I must be unworthy because I'm having all these thoughts and ideas and feelings that I don't think I should be having, I certainly don't want to be having. So there must be something somehow defective about me. That's another way the ego can try to deal with the experiences that are coming down the pike without its permission. When you first start to meditate, or maybe for a very long time when you meditate, who knows? One of the things you deal with is the fact that you can't really control your experience. It doesn't behave. Like you can make your body sit there and be still. You can have the right posture. You can have the right demeanor. But you can't stop every thought from being in your head. Maybe the thoughts stop. Maybe they don't. Either way, you're not really in much control. And that's one of the disquieting things that any meditator has to engage with. What do I do with these experiences that I don't seem to be able to control? And so meditation is just a way of sort of having us face our experience without really distracting ourselves in any way. And what you start to see is all the ways you relate to your experience that don't work, that just cause suffering. That's the wonderful and terrible thing about meditation, is it shows you, oh, when you relate to your experience like that, it doesn't work. You make yourself angry or frustrated or depressed or whatever. And of course, then you have the opportunity. Maybe you can relate to your experience some other way. And one of the great revelations is you find that you can't necessarily choose the next experience you have, but the way you relate to it is more optional than you might have imagined. There are options. There's not only one way to relate to it. There's one way that you're conditioned to relate to it, right? That seems most natural to you, even if it's not working. Most of them don't work at all. But that's part of a maturing ego, right? As the ego matures, and I don't mean in years, I mean in actual maturity, because we don't necessarily mature just because we gather years under our belt. Sometimes we do, which is a good thing, but it's not a guarantee. But as we mature, if we mature, our ego comes into a less and less and less conflictatory relationship with its experience. And the less conflictatory its relationship with its experience, the better it feels. The more stable it is, the more robust, the more resilient, the more mature, you could say. Mature ego knows how to deal with its experience. In other words, it's found a way of dealing with the experience of being that works, more or less. So a lot of people that come to spirituality, that's part of what they're looking for, without even knowing it, is how can I be with my experience in a way that causes me a lot less suffering, maybe even some happiness.